Welcome people to the second part of my Tallö time-lapse. Now, if you're watching this, hopefully you have watched part 1 or the first part. I mean, you're supposed to view these videos consecutively, so hopefully you have seen the first part of it before watching this, because well, this is basically just a continuation because my rendering software DaVinci Resolve didn't allow me to render a video above 1 hour, so instead I had these two videos, these two sections, which are both under an hour. But I don't know how to fix that problem, but yeah, hopefully someone in the comments know how to fix it, or maybe DaVinci Resolve just doesn't allow me to render videos above 1 hour. But anyway, yeah, welcome back. And now I'm working on this sort of waste disposal facility. Now this is, again, every small Swedish town must have this building. It's basically where, now this is a mix of a recycling center and a waste management plan. Now we Swedish people are big into recycling, and yeah, we love recycling. So there are recycling centers basically everywhere, or everywhere in most, at least, major urban centers. And again, we Swedish people have we're very big on having clean water in our houses. I think everyone wants that, but yeah, basically every Swedish household has clean water. No matter where you live, you can live in a very rural part of Sweden and you can still have clean drinking water. Yes, it's such a paradise, this place. Now it's already finished, so I've started working on this other part of the Stenstad, or this is actually not supposed to be the old town, but this is supposed to be, or it's not supposed to be the industrial town, but this is supposed to be the old town. Now, I never planned to originally make this, or I originally intended this to be either a second suburb or just leave it at woodlands. But around the time where I recorded these assets by Goddag, I forgot his name, but he has a series in which he creates Stockholm in the 1920s, and I highly recommend watching that, because the amount of effort that goes into those videos is insane, and I feel kind of guilty because I don't remember his name. But yeah, he made assets which are these very typical Swedish buildings. This isn't one of those. This is made by Lillenerts. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but yeah, she makes really good assets. Very new to the workshop scene, but yeah, this is supposed to be a German building. I don't know what it's supposed to be, but I've repurposed it as a grand hotel. I would assume that maybe in the old times, in the 1800s, this was a very popular tourist location among the rich, or the at least wealthy middle class in Sweden, who would travel here and enjoy the scenery. And then perhaps in the 1920s it became more perhaps a upper middle class establishment, and now I'd assume that it's basically just the town hotel, probably the most expensive prices, but nothing that the average Joe couldn't afford if they saved up money for it. Now, there's a pool here, and this is set in summertime, or at least spring, because in late spring and in autumn and winter, no way the pool would be open. So yeah, enjoy the pool while you can, because otherwise you just can't. Now I'm creating another waterside park, as I've created a lot of other places. Now I started work on the old town, and I've got these, as you see, these, not all of these are by this mysterious workshop creator, which I forgot the name of, but most of these which I'll use, like these two ones that are intersecting right now, are created by him, and as you see, they're very typically Swedish. Now, I would like to see sort of a timber building, because many Swedish cities have these old town areas and they're made of timber, not stone. This would be more common in, like, I would say, the big cities like Stockholm, and they're more, I would say, 1700s. But yeah, there are no wooden buildings, so these buildings will be enough. We'll have to make, and I think they do a good job, and I really like them. And the only reason why I'm building this old town section is because I really like these buildings and I wanted to create this idealized city. Now this part of the city is inspired by the city of Eksjö. Eksjö was actually a very big inspiration for the entire city, especially these the main square, or the square part, whatever you want to call it. But another thing about Eksjö is that it's basically divided into the old town, then there's a big square dividing it with the more Stenstad new town. And I wanted to create something similar, but there weren't any assets at the time, so I just got the main square as an inspiration. But now that whatever person created this has created these buildings, I decided to create this old town section. Now, the lore I could use for this is that perhaps the stone town stands on where another part of the old town once stood. Perhaps this was some sort of very prominent trade center in Sweden. But just as Eksjö, a lot of the old town where the new town stands was burned down, and only the other half of the old town survives. And yes, the town of Eksjö, the new town, or the Stenstad, whatever you want to call it, stands on where the second part of the old town once stood, but it burned down, which is unfortunate. It was actually burnt down by someone trying to dry their clothes. So yeah, that's unfortunate. But yeah, I would assume that something similar happened to this part, that one half of the old town was burnt down and now only the second half remains, while the burnt down part was redeveloped. Another very similar story to this was in Norrköping, which a big portion of this town burned down, but it wasn't the old town that burned down, it was the Stenstad, or the industrial area building. So yeah, a lot of it disappeared, which, I mean, it's really unfortunate that so much of it disappeared. But now thinking about it, it would have probably disappeared even without the help of the fire, but instead with the help of modern developers and their incessant need to redevelop old areas with modern architecture. But yeah, I don't think this old town section turned out how I wanted it to, but I still think it really has this cozy charm to it. And I didn't really put any cafes or anything, because, well, most of them are very quiet. Like in Gävle, when I traveled there, the old town, there were no shops or anything. It was basically just a residential neighborhood, and I kinda liked it. It was quiet, and that's basically it. And most of these old towns in Sweden don't really have any touristy side to it. And that big building that you just saw, the Rama Town Hall, is supposed to be kind of like a police station and a fire station, which still stands. But yeah, now I'm starting to work on the factory itself. Sorry, drinking tea at the same time while I'm recording a video. But yeah, I'm starting to work on the factory, and as you see, I'm having major problems with finding a design I like, because I have a huge variety of industrial assets I wanted to use, and I really didn't know how to combine them all. So this is basically just trial and error, popping down a bunch of random buildings until I find a combination which I actually like, instead of it just looking like an abhorrent mix with each other. And right now, as you see, it's not very pretty, just this absolute mesh of styles. But now it took me so much time that I just skipped the process, and instead now you have a design which I actually liked, and I think it looks alright, pretty good. And again, this isn't a very big factory. I mean, if a factory needed to sustain that many if I say of that size, I mean the Stenstad, then the factory would probably need to be a lot bigger, because, well, I mean, probably just like, if we're being realistic, if the factory was actually this big, the industrial part of the city would be much smaller. But again, it's idealized, and this factory building is inspired by the one in Klippan, again, as I said in my previous video. And it has this very big industrial building, or this big factory, which I really like, and I'm just kind of creating a connection to it. Yeah. Now, I wanted this to be a museum, sort of a museum of Sweden's industrial heritage, and perhaps or either that, or perhaps it's some sort of museum of the average day in a factory worker. Now, what I'm creating here is a sort of bike path, a pedestrian bike path, which I mean, it's supposed to be like, this is actually something that I copied directly from Klippan. They have this old railway line, this old disused railway line, that they converted into a path, which I absolutely love the idea of that, and I think that doing something like that still adds some sort of like charm to it. It's like a feeling that it's an actual town, you know, these small details, like an old railway track being converted, and I really like that idea. And yeah, now I'm just kind of decorating it with some planters here and there. Jesus Christ, I'm saying a lot of I mean, this is improv, so, and this is the first time I'm recording a video in this format, so you'll hear a lot of that, or you have heard a lot of that. Now, yeah, now I'm placing down a statue, a very ornamental statue, and some visitor information, and for the museum and the experience. Now I'm actually starting to work on the countryside. I'm done with the city itself, so yeah, that's the last you'll see of it. And about bike paths, I'm going on a tangent right now, but I don't know why, but cyclists in Sweden, I don't know why, maybe it's just my area, but most cyclists in my area I feel like they don't know how to ride a bike. Now, I'm not saying this as some sort of just like saying this to like make fun of cyclists, because yeah, I get it, it's very funny to make fun of cyclists, but you know, I'm trying to learn how to ride a bike myself, so I mean, and it's we should really use transport systems like bikes, because well, they are much more ecologically friendly, and they're just much better for the environment. Although I personally like to use my own 2 feet. That's the most environmentally friendly way to get yourself from one place to another. just use your legs. But yeah, in Sweden for some reason, or maybe it's just my area, but bicyclists, they don't know how to drive. I've nearly been hit on multiple occasions. Like the only reason why I have never been hit is because I usually dodge out of the way. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure they're just riding into me. And I don't know why, because when I was in Copenhagen, it seemed like everyone knew how to ride a bike. Meanwhile, where I live, it seems like everyone drives like an absolute nutter. And most of the time they just use both sides of the pedestrian path, even though my local city government just spent a lot of cash to create new bike paths and extending them. They still seem to prefer to drive on the pedestrian paths, which are like 2/3 smaller. And yeah, it's just really pissing me off. Again, be like Danish drivers, they're much better. Be like Danish cyclists, they're much better. But yeah, tangent aside, now I'm starting to build these sort of villages. And my entire idea for this actually started when I visited a strawberry farm with my family when we went strawberry picking. Yeah, we got a lot of strawberries. They're very good strawberries. But yeah, strawberry picking, that's probably the most Swedish activity, right behind having a fika and calling yeah, it's probably the most Swedish activity. Besides having a fika and calling a chokladboll by the N-word. Yeah, that's a joke only Swedish people will get, and hopefully at least one Swedish person is watching this and at least had a chuckle at that joke. But yeah, now I'm just building a farm here. And as I said, when I went to strawberry picking, I saw this small village that we drove past, and that village was just really quaint, and I wanted to create like a Swedish village in Skylines, and that developed into like a city, a countryside. And yeah, the entire idea for this was basically just because I went strawberry picking with my family. So yeah, family activities are sometimes good. But yeah, now just going to let you guys enjoy the time lapse, since I have talked for way too long and gone on a couple of tangents and side talks. But yeah, enjoy the time lapse for now. See ya. what you're seeing me create now is a some sort of noble palace. Now, I don't know why, maybe it's just the quirk of the Swedish language, but we really like calling palaces slott, which is castles. I mean, there is a word for palaces, that's palats, but I can't even give you an example of a palace being called palats in Sweden. And like actual castles, like forts and stuff, they're usually called like castells or borgs, which are like a castell, that's basically another word for castle. Castell, and I would say perhaps that's a word for a keep, but I am not 100% sure. And borg is like a fort. Yeah, there's this really nice borg in Vaxholm. It's called this castle, or it's a fort actually. It's called Vaxholm Castell, and it's a fort, not a castle. But yeah, let's call it a castell. But yeah, it's really cool. It was built during the time of Gustav Vasa, or Gustavus Adolphus. We usually just, most Swedish people just call Gustav Vasa II Gustav Vasa. I mean, it's weird because even the first Gustav Vasa was a highly influential king of Sweden. And yeah, I know that Gustavus Adolphus or Gustav Adolf II was much more influential. But Gustav Adolf I was still a very important king for Swedish history. But yeah, what did I talk about? Yeah, palaces. And now that palace was very well. There are a lot of palaces in Sweden which you can visit, and that's probably belong to some sort of lord of the area. And yeah, now I'm just building another village, and I'm building probably the most Swedish thing I'm probably building the most Swedish thing you can find in any place, and that's a pizza stuga, or a pizza cottage, which is basically like a small pizza shop. Now, I wouldn't imagine like a small village having a pizza stuga, but certainly every Swedish town has a small pizza shop where they sell, like, Swedish pizzas are very special. They're basically very big, but they're very thin, and I think Italians wouldn't be very happy with seeing them, but they're certainly very nice. We Swedish people also love kebab pizza, which is pizza with kebab. I mean, I don't know why, but it's hard. It slaps so fucking hard. I don't know why it's so great. It also has vitlök sauce on it, which is so nice. And they'll probably also sell some sort of gyros, which is Greek kebab. Oh boy, calling gyros kebab. Oh boy, that will sure get me in trouble with my Greek father. But yeah, anyway, now I'm building another farm here. And yeah, actually a small Swedish village, a typical like these red buildings. They're in a paint called Falunröd. I don't know why, but yeah, why it's called Falunröd, I guess it's because it was made in Falun. I know that Falun is home to, if I'm not wrong, Falun is home to this huge copper mine, which provided a lot of bronze for Sweden. I think it was actually the biggest copper mine in Europe during its time. But yeah, probably has something to do with mine. I can't think of anything else to think of. But the reason why Fallen Red is so popular or it was so popular, it's still very popular because it's just such an iconic color. But the reason why it used to be popular is because it was very cheap and wealthy. This is actually something very funny, that if you go to like farms or cities in sort of these old town sections, many buildings will have like yellow facades, but the rest of the building will be red, and that's because yellow was much more expensive than red. So they usually had it like as a symbol of prestige, but they didn't have the money to paint the entire building in yellow or other colors. So yeah, they just left the rest of it red, which I find really funny. And yeah, and a small Swedish town with in a classical fallen red stuga, and by the waterfront, nature, and a small pizza stuga. That's the Swedish dream, you know. The American dream is to, you know, live in the suburbs. I mean, who actually likes the American dream? It kind of sucks. But yeah, the American dream sucks, but the Swedish dream is fantastic. You just live in a small hut in the countryside with a pizza stuga. Oh, that's the dream. But anyway, now I'm starting to build another town, and I'm actually going to let you enjoy the time lapse for now, and I'll come back in a few minutes and we'll see you. See. building right now is this small town, and now small towns like these, I wouldn't say that they're very common since it has this main street and all, but this town is heavily inspired by the town of Järvsö, which is this ski resort. And it's a really nice place. I really like Järvsö, and it has this church on this island, or yeah, it's an island surrounded by a small promenade. I mean, the island is much smaller, but I wanted to create something similar, and I didn't want to just have this church in the middle of nowhere. So I decided to create this very stereotypical but not very realistic Swedish town around it. And I absolutely love how it turned out. It truly does have a Swedish vibe to it, and although the town was a bit difficult to create, I think it turned out very well at the end. Now I'm creating some sort of residence. Maybe it's the summer palace of whatever lord there used to be, or perhaps some other lord, or perhaps it's the residence of the parish priest or whatever. But now it's a visitor center and a visitor center, maybe also a souvenir shop where you could buy a lot of souvenirs of the surrounding area, maybe some engraving of the church and the town. And a town like this, I would imagine that it's a very popular tourist attraction, because as I said, these aren't very usual towns. You know, you have a major trail, you have a very historical and tight city center, and yeah, it's just a very cute town all in all. And yeah, nothing really more to add. I'm just adding some hedges to the backyards right now, and I had this little waterside walk, which basically every waterside in this build has a small park or walk, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, this is definitely a place I maybe not live here, but certainly live here for like a short time, have a summer residence nearby. Now the time lapse is starting to come to an end. Now I'm just going to finish off by building one last village and a few more farms, or actually I'll create 3 more villages and towns, and or will I? Yeah. Anyway, I've actually forgotten, because I remember that I built 3 towns, and the one I'm building right now is one of them, but I can't remember if I actually cut out the part where I built them or not. I mean, I would understand why, because it would basically be the same, but I think the town that the church accompanies is actually the nicest town, except for the town with the church I just created. But yeah, this is another town with a church, a medieval church at that, and yeah, it's I guess that it's just like a nice church that you would like to visit. Now I did put down these cobblestones, and I think they look very awkward. They almost don't fit, I'd say, but I at least try to mask it to the best of my effort. But yeah, the masking job isn't the best. But anyway, we're approaching the end of the time lapse, and I really hope you enjoyed this time lapse, and yeah, I'll leave you with the rest of it, and of course the end cinematics. See ya in the next video.